Okay, Sally, take over.
All right, let me get this thing out here. Good evening, everybody. Welcome from chilly California. We're experiencing weather in the 30s and 40s, which is a phenomenon for us. And I'm going out in my scarf and my coat and anyway, but the sun is out, the stories are running in our heads, and we're ready for another wonderful time with the tail spinners. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for coming and enjoy the evening. All right, Liz, take it away.
Thanks, Sally. All right. Hi, everybody. Great to see everybody. We're going to get started. We've got lots of wonderful stories for you tonight. We have as our featured teller tonight, Jane Cole. But before we hear from Jane, we want to welcome one of our East Coast members, Bev Schwartz. And Bev hasn't been able to join us for the last couple of gatherings, or at least not to tell us a story. So we're really glad to have you back, Bev, and tell us a story.
Good evening. If you're going to spotlight me, great. Well, you've heard of Fiddler on the Roof, right? And there's all the songs on the Broadway play. Well, in Eastern Europe in the early 1900s is when Fiddler on the Roof was taking place. And in the early 1900s, I'm going to tell you today, the name of my story is There's Room for One More, about that section of Europe. It was in Eastern Europe where like Russia and Ukraine and Poland is. And the governments there said, we don't like you Jews, get out or we're going to kill you. And they all started migrating out of the country. And a great number of them went and took the boat over to America and landed in Ellis Island. And the reason why they chose this was because people from their village had already been there and said, come to New York and we will help you find jobs here. And you will know the people from our villages and you will feel more at home here than any other place that you can go. And there was an association called Hebrew Tailors. And up and down the Hudson River, there was New York City, and the capital is 3 hours north in Albany. Along the banks are little cities. And then when you got to Albany, that was the capital. And they were setting people up that were seamstresses and tailors because the area needed that kind of service. So my grandfather, Meyer Shearer, who was living in Russia, and my grandmother, who was living in Poland, both arrived around 1923. And the Hebrew tailors met them in New York City, and they took them and they said, where are your relatives? They both said Albany, and off they took the train to Albany. And the Hebrew tailors there met them, and they start bringing them into their home, and they set them up in their own tailor shop where they could live above. And it was a walk-in basement. And the name of his store was Meyer Shearer's Tailor Shop. And this is a picture of my grandfather. And he there is sewing on a sewing machine. Now, my mother and my aunt and my uncle were born above that tailor shop. And it grew. They had a potbelly stove in there. And all their friends and new immigrants would come and sit around that potbelly stove and talk about the old country and their new lives. I mean, imagine they only had what they could carry in their arms to Ellis Island. Everything had to be left behind. Now, my parents decided to buy a house, a two-family house, and my grandparents lived on the bottom and we lived on the top. And my grandmother would take me when I started about 3 years old. My earliest memories in life was being taken on a trolley downtown Albany. And they were on a street called Arch Street, which was perpendicular to Broadway. Now, I got a phone call about a month ago or two, and they said, Bev, we need a story. Could you look at the Albany Institute of History and Art and pick out something in the museum or in our archives that you would, be able to create a story? But you have only 2 days to do it, and then we'll put it on YouTube. I said, oh boy. So I looked, And there was a picture of 1923 when my grandparents came to Albany, of downtown Albany. And it looked very busy with all these people in different clothes and, delivering things in horses and wagons. And you could tell it was a hustle and bustle area of the whole area. And I said, I've seen this picture before. And I went to the box of my family. I'm the historian of pictures. I had 4 similar pictures that went with the 2 pictures on that set. So now I had 6 pictures, and they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. And I said, I know my story. It's telling about my grandparents and what they did to welcome immigrants into our country. What happened would be my grandparents would have 2 signs on their wall. Sorry, no trust. Meaning if you didn't pick up your clothes and you don't pay for them, you're never going to get them back. And the other sign said, clothes left after 30 days, not responsible, meaning they might be gone. And what they did was when people didn't pick up their clothes, they took it to a back area of the basement with a sheet separating the front and the back of the store. And they would leave all the clothes that people didn't pick up. And they passed the they passed the word around. And that potbelly stove. If you know new immigrants, no matter what country they're from, send them over and we will give them some clothes to wear. So the word got out, and people with I just loved seeing them coming into the store. They were dressed with the turbines. They were from India, and they would be in their clothes that they came from, that they were used to wearing in their countries. My grandmother would take them into the back of the store, and she would try on clothes. Some had to be taken in and sewn or whatever. And there was always bags, brown paper bags on the little table back there where my grandparents would eat lunch or dinner while they were working. And my grandmother would hand them also a bag of food and to take with them. And I say, Grandma, why are you also giving them food? Well, they're new in the country and they're just getting started. They probably don't have a lot of money for food, and they have no money for clothes, and they need to live, and they need to get jobs, and they want to look nice and feel good and not have an empty stomach. Remember, we were also immigrants, and people helped us. So we're paying it forward. We are going to help all immigrants that we know that come into this country, because they're just like us, human beings. And we need to treat them with respect. Well, I would come home and go down to visit my grandma, which at that point was living below me. And I'd come to dinner, and there'd be 1 or 2 people that maybe were in the store that I recognized, or other people dressed up in clothes that I knew they had to be from different countries. And I said, Grandma, why do you invite these people to our house for dinner? I know you give them things at the store, but why are they here? And she said, Bev, these people are starting a new life, to have to practice English, need new friends. There's always room for 1 more around our kitchen table. A few years later, my parents moved to Latham in the suburbs. And I would come home, and around our table, sometimes there was people. And I said, Mom, who are these people? Well, they're new immigrants. And I invite them over to practice English, to maybe have a meal, to make new friends, to make them feel that this is their new home and people welcome them. There's always room for 1 more. And I said, she's following the tradition of Grandma and Grandpa. She's welcoming people and trying to help immigrants make a new life. Now, this past Christmas, I'm Jewish, and I didn't have anything to do. And I said, I know what I'm going to do. And I invited all the little Christmas orphans who had no place to go around my table, because I wanted them to feel that they had a place to celebrate their holiday. And people said, Bev, it's so nice of you to have us all. Do you do this all the time? And I said, well, there's a tradition in my family. There's always room for 1 more around your table. And people of all different faiths, all different countries, and all different customs are always welcome around my table. So I hope that you, now knowing this tradition, will start maybe looking for people at their holidays to come and celebrate with you, or need just a place to practice English because they're new in our country, or need to learn to, traditions and things that we do and eat American food. And the best part of our tradition in my family is the food they bring from their countries that we've never experienced. Boy, I always look forward to their food. So a picture is worth 1,000 words. And these immigrants that came to Albany in the early 1920s, and their children's children now, has made Albany the great place it is today, a great place to live. Thank you.
Thank you, Bev. What a beautiful story. I'm so touched, and I'm sure we all are touched and inspired.
Thank you.
And I imagine that many of us heard something in your story that also connected with something in our family stories. And that's what's so special about family stories. And what a great warm up for our featured teller, Jane Cole, who is going to share some more family stories. Jane has been a member of our SWAP for many years in person. And I can see Jane at the front of the room telling us of some of her own adventures, her very, very adventurous nature, both all over the, nature in the US and abroad, and more recently sharing more of the research that she's been doing into the very special family that made her Jane, the Jane that we so enjoy hearing. So Jane, please share your story with us. Welcome, Jane.
Well, when we were very little, our mother turned us loose into a world of dangers. We lived on a street in Sonora, California, where my grandfather's farm took up half of the valley on one side and all the way to the ridgetop on the other side. There were 5 houses that had belonged to our family on that street, and our daddy had built the last house for us. Our mom babysat for 3 little cousins, Lenny, Petey, and Danelle. That made, with my sister and I, that made 5 little kids 5 and under. From that house, our mom released us into the world of dangers. Now, there were 3 dangers that we still debate today: the rattlesnake danger, poison oak, and the cliff. Now, rattlesnakes, we never saw or even heard their buzzing tails in the grass, although we combed every inch of that gulch and hillside in our daily adventures. Poison oak was a different story. We were quite familiar with it. It was everywhere. We knew it in every season, even the bare sticks in winter. Now, I do have to confess that I failed to recognize it on one occasion. It was a big leaf, and it was totally lacking its identifying characteristics. Sadly, I used it as toilet paper. So on that one lamentable occasion, it was a problem. But the rest of the time, it was a boring, everyday background danger. Now, the cliff was right across the street from our house, and you could find us there in the afternoons playing up on the top of the cliff under some buckbrush. We made our mother swear a blood oath on a stack of Bibles that she would call us precisely 5 minutes before Popeye time. We waited to hear her clear, ringing voice echoing out over the little valley. Popeye time! Popeye time! Then the mad scramble would start. Now, the shortest distance between 2 points being a straight line, Lenny, Petey, Danelle, and I would skid down the rocky face of the cliff on our bottoms, yelling, Popeye time! Popeye time! Karen, my little sister, was only around 2, so she had to go to a shorter part of the cliff to slide down, where she would find herself left in the dust of the Popeye stampede. Popeye time! Popeye time! Karen had added a few seconds to her overall time by this detour. And so she would come scuttling along behind us, calling, hey, wait for me, you 4 guys. We would charge into the house and come sliding in on the floor in front of the TV before the first I am what I am was out of Popeye's mouth. Now, having covered the 3 everyday boring dangers, we can proceed to the 5 dangers. Well, the first danger was the powder house danger. At the end of our dead-end street was a gate. Behind the gate was a world of mystery for us. You went past the cattle loading chute, past the Hales and Simons freight wagons, past who knows what rusting hulks of what, past the pig pens, past piles of posts, past tangles of rusty barbed wire. And there was the powder house. It was made of big squarish blocks of pale rock. It had a big iron door and a big padlock. Inside was stored TNT, explosives, dynamite. We were learning a lot of vocabulary. The dynamite was stored there for working on ranch work, like blowing up stumps, or in the high country in the summers for doing trail maintenance. Our daddies had worked on those trails, and they rode into the mountains in the summer and fished lakes with names like Toe Jam, Yellowhammer, and Huckleberry. Our family gave us big talks about the danger of big explosions, and we were warned, do not play around the powder house. We learned to read the signs on the gate. No trespassing. Keep out. Private property. We stayed out. That was Mr. Layton's private property. Number 2, the mine shaft danger. When we were very little, our dad took us up the hill to see the mine shaft. He must have carried Karen. The mine shaft had 4 big fence posts at the corners with 3 strands of rusty, saggy barbed wire strung around. There was a strip of land inside the wire fence, a fringe of grass where the cows couldn't quite reach through the barbed wire fence, and a big black straight down hole. Our daddy lifted us up so we could look down. We couldn't see the bottom. He taught us how to throw rocks into the hole and count 1,001, 1,002, 1,003. Click. He carefully explained that if we ever went inside the barbed wire fence and fell down the mine shaft, we would break all our family's hearts, all their hearts. We took this as a serious responsibility. So when we little cousins went up the hill to throw rocks into the mine shaft, we stayed on the outside of the 3 strands of barbed wire. Danger 3, the beehives danger. Our grandfather kept bees for pollinating his garden and orchard, for honey, of course, and for a cure for his arthritis. By the time we 3 little cousins were running up and down his garden paths, he was too crippled to keep the bees. So his sons and grandsons were doing it for him. The beehives were in the pasture behind Pete and Kay's house. We loved to see the bees buzzing in and out, but our grown-ups told us that Grandpa's bees were an especially cranky, hard stinging breed, and we should stay well back from the hives. We made a daily trip to the bee danger. And who knows who started it, but soon enough, we were stepping 1 step closer, 1 step closer, 1 step closer, until we could stand very close to the hives. And if we were very calm and very quiet, we could watch the bees buzzing all around and going in the little door into the white boxes of the beehives. I don't think any of us were ever stung, but if we were very brave about it. Now, in the same pasture with the beehives was where we made the cow pie paths. Now, in the Sierra foothills in the summer, cow pies dry into big, round, hard discs. Sometimes when you peel one up, the bottom can be a little damp, but they're perfect for rolling on their edge and for making complex, elaborate cow pie stepping stone paths all over the pasture. We would jump from stepping stone to stepping stone, avoiding the hot lava that was the dirt. Karen and I played a reasonable facsimile of this game in our living room. The carpet was the dirt, the hot lava. Our parents' record collection were the stepping stones. We only played this version of the game once. Past the beehives and the cow pie paths was the Bossy danger. Bossy was our grandparents' movie star cow. She was in Death Valley Days and other Westerns filmed around Sonora and Colombia. But our family did not tell us that Bossy was a gentle movie star. Our Bossy was a danger. And if she had a baby calf, she was an even bigger danger. If they were on the hill, we had to stay far, far away from them. If they were in the barn, we would go in to watch them eat. I remember Bossy's big brown eyes with long eyelashes. And how she would flick her ears and twitch her whole skin to shake the flies off. Karen remembers how she would reach through the rough wood planks to touch Bossy's soft, soft fur. Karen remembers Bossy's big, pink tongue licking and chewing the hay. We all remember Bossy's big, sharp horns that could poke a hole right through a little kid. I sometimes look back and wonder why, when Bossy was in her movie career on Death Valley days, she didn't give Ronald Reagan just a little poke, but maybe he was still a Democrat back then. Now, it's good to remember that we didn't have to roam the countryside. We had a swing set, we had a playhouse, we had a tree house with chicken wire wrapped around it so we wouldn't fall out and break our necks. We had plenty of toys. We had 2 rabbits, 2 cats, Goat the baby goat, and a dog named Arfer who arfed at cars. We didn't have to roam the countryside. Our mother was a wonderful teacher with great ideas and lots of enthusiasm. She loved little kids. We didn't have to roam the countryside. Well, you might remember the 5th danger, the one we absolutely knew would bring dire consequences. Well, yes, it was the horses at the top of the hill danger that proved irresistible. One day, when we were ranging up towards the top of the hill, we found ourselves standing at the fence line, looking through at the horses in the corral on the other side. I am absolutely sure there was a horse that looked just like Trigger. We stood and watched. We listened. We called. We couldn't whistle yet. We reached. We yearned. You know what we did. We crawled through the fence. Now remember, we knew private property, no trespassing, keep out. But there we were at the corral. We wanted to see the horses run. We wanted to see them rear up on their hind legs. We wanted to hear them neigh. Apparently, this is what drew the attention of our mother, who was sitting on the back porch down in the valley. I'll turn the story over to my mother at this point. Well, I was sitting on the back porch visiting with a friend when I noticed a commotion at the top of the hill. I knew there was trouble, and then I saw 5 little towheads run across. Well, I apologized to my friend and ran out the door. I ran up the hill until I collapsed. I almost had a heart attack. I had to catch my breath. I was frantic. I was only halfway up the hill. When I finally caught my breath, I ran again to the top of the hill. By the time I got there, I looked around and there were no little kids. I looked all over, then I spotted them. They were running down the hill towards the mine shaft. I screamed at them to stop and come back. They came back and then they ran down in front of me with me right behind. I think I did catch my hand swat right on one or two of their bottoms. When we got down to the bottom of the hill and home, I gave them a good talking to. They were restricted from the hill entirely. I don't know for how long. At the time, I thought it was forever. Well, dear listeners, it wasn't forever. We continued to live in the middle of our 5 dangers, plus the 3 debatable dangers. Remember, we didn't have to roam the countryside, but no one closed the gate. They knew better. In fact, they knew best.
It's wonderful, Jane.
Oh, that was so wonderful.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, I just want to say, you know, I said after Bev's story, like maybe all of us could relate to something in it. In one level, I couldn't relate to a single thing you told, Jane, because my childhood was
Completely different.
my mom just got on the Zoom here and she could back me up that we were not allowed to go roaming around, you know? But your story, like the vividness, the details, I was right there. And so that's the other wonderful thing that stories can do is bring us into a world that we don't know, and yet we feel like we've visited. And you really, and you use the Zoom screen like a unbelievable. It was so fun. Thank you so much. Another round of applause for Jane. All right, our next storyteller. So we've been in the world of reality and families, and Bobby is going to take us, well, way back, I think, and into traditional mythology, legend, folklore. And so, Bobby, welcome, and maybe set up your story for us, and we can't wait to hear it.
Okie dokie. This is the second part of a first part that I started last month. And I want to thank Sally and Liz for the opportunity to do this and all the wonderful storytellers and the listeners who come. Thank you. The first part was about the August Jade Emperor and how he was chosen to set up the universe after the big gods did their inventions. Well, he had done that. Everything was in wonderful order, but he was looking at the solar system, which he had started with a flick like that to go around and around. And he was sitting there and he was watching the Earth. It was going around Jupiter and it was coming back in 12 months. It's doing its thing, going around the sun and coming back to Jupiter. And then there was the Earth. It had a little round moon, and the moon was going around the Earth in 12 months. That made a year. And there was a big party on the Earth. Everybody loved the years. This happened going around the Earth. This happened along with the 12 years going over back to Juniper. But something was wrong. Things were set in 12s. He had 12 years, 12 months. The day was set into 2 sets of 12 hours. But how were the people going to know the difference between all of this? There had to be some way. So he was looking at his what his favorite thing was to do to the animals on the earth. They were very compelling and very clever. And he just really, and as he's watching him, he said, I have an idea. I'll invite them up and they can help with the zodiac. I'm gonna call this 12th set the zodiac. So he called his minister, Jangu, and he came in and he said, I want you to write an invite to the animals on the earth. And Sangu was listening. He says, they have to come to the west side of the Yellow River so they can swim across to us, and tell them it's a big feast and party. And those 12 that come first will have a great honor, but don't tell them it's the zodiac time. Don't. So Sinyu, he wrote his invite on this lovely white paper with golden ink, and it said, Dear honored animals of China, please come to a feast offered by the great Jade August Emperor, the supreme emperor of beginning of time. The race begins on the second noon moon on the day after the first day of winter. Gather at the edge of the West Yellow River. Wait until a horn blows. That's your signal to start. The first 12 animals who cross the great river will be honored in the zodiac. Well, he was all ready. He took his invite up to the minister. The minister took his invite up to the great Jade Emperor, and the Emperor read it over and he said, you told about the zodiac. He said, but it's okay. It's okay. It's marvelous. Just make copies and copies. So the minister finished his copies and he floated down to earth. And as he was used to walking in the clouds, so as he got onto the rocky earth, a rock tripped him. Right away, the invites went everywhere, and the playful wind came by and it rustled all the everywhere. Well, he was very sad, and he went up and he told the August Jade Emperor what had happened. He said, no mind, we'll just see who comes. Many will come. So the day came. The minister was busy setting up the feast in the meantime, and the day came, and animals were coming up to the riverside at night. And just as the day broke, the horn sang and off they went. Well, Duck started, but she was already the spirit of the South, so she didn't want to continue. The current was too much for her. Mouse, he stuck his feet in the water. Oh, it was too cold, so he didn't want to continue. Badger came. No, he couldn't be bothered by it. He was the badger. Fox looked at that water. He said, I don't want to swim across that. And Bear, he decided he had enough fame. He wasn't going to come. And there was Rat looking up at Big Ox, and Rat tapped him on the leg and looked up. Ox, could I sit on you? And as you swim across, and Ox, being a noble, helpful person, he was helping the people on the earth, said, sure, just get up, climb up on me. So they started off, and Ox really loved the water, and he was very swift. So they got up on the east side first. Then Tiger came along, and he had a perfect place. He loved to swim. He tossed and he turned, and he got himself across the water. Rabbit didn't like water very much, so she found a rocky place, but she's very clever at hopping, and she hopped around real fast, and she came up. And then Dragon, he loved the water. He twisted, he turned, he dived, he swam in lakes and rivers and the oceans. He was proficient. Snake also liked water, and he hustled itself through the currents in a very prestige manner. Horse was kind of looking at it, and he thought to himself, well, if I can run in the fields, I can run across this river, which is exactly what he did. Goat, who did not like water very much, selected a very shallow part, but it had moss in it, so Goat very carefully took its time, and he got across. Well, Monkey went back and forth all the time in the tree, so he went back and forth, and before he got to the other side, he stopped at a mango tree and had a feast. Then he hopped down and followed the rest up. Rooster was there, and Rooster hated water, so he found a very flat, rocky place like Rabbit had, and he flapped his wings and he hopped from rock to rock, and he got across. Dog didn't mind water, but he wanted a shallow spot. because he didn't like the currents. So he found him a shallow spot. He made it across. Boar, oh, Boar loved the muddy parts of that river, and he splashed in the mud and he did everything, and he made it across. Well, the 12 walked up to the mansion, and there was Ox, and he was pounding on it with his horn. And Sen Yu opened the door, and there was the August Jade Emperor just standing there, just surprised. And he loved them. And he says, "You're here, you're in person, you're here. The 12, but 12, just 12 of you?" He said, "Oh, that's all right. The zodiac only has 12 places, and you'll work very, very, very fine." And they had their feasts, they had drinks, they had food, they had more food, they sang songs. And then the August Jade Emperor explained to them that each one was chosen on the time that they came, the order that they came in, and that they would be honored in a set of 12 years around Jupiter, around the sun, back to Jupiter, 12 months around the earth, and a day of 12 light and 12 dark hours, year, month, and hour. And they were just really, really honored. They just couldn't believe that this was happening to them. But Rat was thinking, I came on Ox and we both got here first. So he went up to the emperor. He said, "Excuse me." But he says, "I'm very clever and very smart. I should be first." Well, Ox got part of this going on. So he went up to the emperor and he said, "Well, excuse me, but I should go first because I'm honorable and I'm honest, and the people love me." And the Jade Emperor looked at both of them. He hadn't expected this problem. So he yelled out to the audience, who should go first? The other animals watching all this. And they each had a different vision of Rat and Ox. And they started to argue. And the Jade Emperor couldn't stand it. And he said, "Okay, Sanyu will put you up in rooms tonight. And in the morning, you can decide who will be first." And with that, he left. Well, that's the next part of my story. What the animals decided and what the emperor decided and so forth and so on. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Bobby. Your telling is so magical. And
Oh, thank you.
also the twinkle in your eye about some of the shenanigans of the different animals. And we could really see them all making their way and how their personalities came out.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for listening. It's a great story.
It is. It's a good story. And for this time of year, when the Lunar New Year, and of course, this is the year of the rabbit.
Right. Good for you.
Okay. So our next storyteller is Ed Lewis, who is coming to us from Sacramento area and also on the board of the Storytelling Association and also the organizer of the SAC genre series, which we just had last week. So want to just make a plug that and thank Ed for all of that, as well as his own storytelling, and that you can go on the YouTube channel. All of us can go and see both our swap events and also the genre events, which so many people who are on this Zoom right now have represented our swap, and we're so proud of that. And that's the Storytelling Association of California's YouTube channel. Okay, Ed, tell us a story. Ed says he's got a love story.
All right. Well, after finishing my 2 years of draft service during the Vietnam War, I went on a 2-year Don Quixote soul-searching journey, and just to open my heart to love again. I started in the Canary Islands. I found a cave up in the mountains, and the Canary Islands are off the coast of Morocco. I found a cave up in the mountains, and I lived there for 6 months, lived off the land, trying to find my soul. I read Baba Ram Das and was practicing To Be Here Now. did yoga every morning, lived off the land, survival like, and it really opened me up. From there, I had met a man who was going back to Morocco to do some hashish dealing. So I followed him, and we took a freighter to Africa and went up on 3 days on a truck through the Sahara Desert up to an oasis in southern Morocco, and an amazing market. And that's a story all in itself. We hitchhiked up to this place we'd heard about. It was a beautiful bay, and it was populated by our hippie brethren from the Scandinavian countries. So we hitchhiked up there, and we came to this beautiful plateau where about 30 people were camped out. They were from Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Germany, Amsterdam, and they were having a great celebration every day. And that's what I really needed. And I was looking to open up my heart. And I've been 6 months in a cave. So my friend's name was BC, and BC and I got out of the car and we came up to this plateau, and there was I was immediately attracted to this Scandinavian woman who just seemed so beautiful and charming and welcoming, this great smile. And I tried to say something, but it kind of came out like, we're looking for it. And BC took over. He said, yeah, we're looking for a campsite. Is there a campsite here we can get to? And she said, oh yeah, come on, right down here. We got a spot right next to where I'm at. So, he started walking, he grabbed me and pulled me along, and my heart's just beating in my chest. And oh, I'm in love, I'm in love. So we went up for dinner. It was a feast. It was good hashish being passed around, good food, great stories. People had instruments. We were singing, and I sat right next to her. And I found out that her name was Danica, and she was from Sonneberg, which is in southern Denmark, which is where 10 miles away, my grandparents and my Uncle Nels were born. So we had a lot in common right off the bat. And she was there. She was 29 years old. I was 28. She was a physics professor at a university in southern Denmark, and she was traveling, hitchhiking with her two professor girlfriends down from Denmark to South Africa to go on a safari hiking experience. They had a 2-month trip planned. They were just amazing. We shared stories. I mean, it was true love for me. And did I mention that I just lived in a cave for 6 months? The next 7 days were just magical. Except the day after that evening party of music and everything, that morning, an Australian surfer, BC, and I went down to the bay, and we set up a lean-to. We got a pot, got a fire going, got a pot of oatmeal, poured in the oatmeal, got some figs and dates, everything just simmering. We took a half a pound of hashish, we crumbled it and put it in with the oatmeal. Then we went out swimming, threw some frisbees around, and we came back, we ate that oatmeal. And I do remember a couple things for the rest of the day. I remember that I couldn't stand up. And I remember 3 beautiful Scandinavian women coming down and going like this. They were talking, and I am usually talkative, but no words would come out. About 4 o'clock that afternoon, we all woke up, and I decided to go for a swim. So I swam in the bay, and I soon got caught in a riptide, and I was heading out to the Atlantic Ocean. Luckily, I thank my parents for those swimming lessons. I grew up in the Puget Sound area. I swam. I knew a lot about swimming, and I just powered as much as I could. But I don't know if you know much about riptides, but if you get caught in them, it's like you go a foot and you go back 3 feet. But I was young, strong, and I just powered as much as I could. And then I saw Danica up on this cliff, and she had thrown a rope off. So I started swimming towards it. But as I got closer, I realized the surf was just pounding into the cliff. There's no way I could have survived that. So I just kept going, powered, got close to shore and I finally saw the bottom and I just relaxed. You know, I was safe, but it was 10 feet down and I sunk right to the bottom, took a big gulp of salt water. And I don't know how I got out of there, but the survival instinct took place and I swam, got up, swam, made it to shore. And there was Danica, my true love, waiting for me. She gave me the sweetest kiss. And for the next 5 days after I recovered, we moved in together on our campsite down at that beach. It was magical, those 5 days. We spent every morning, we would go into the local village. Now, she spoke 5 languages fluently. I spoke Spanish, but she spoke French, and Morocco is a French colony. So we went into these villages, down alleyways, got food. We took camel rides out into the desert. And it was just, my heart was just blossoming. We came back, and at night we'd swim in the waters, and at night gold flecks would come off of your arms and your body as you were swimming. And I found out later that they were bioluminescent crustaceans. It's really a cool thing to see if you've never seen it. Swimming was great. And we come back and just hold each other and tell stories. We just learned so much about each other. And I was inspired to write poems and sing to her, even though I don't have the greatest singing voice. But we would talk about music we like. And one of the songs that came up that you might remember is by the Flamingos. It's, I Only Have Eyes for You. And I don't know if you remember the song. I'm not a great singer, but I'm gonna sing it with me. It goes like this. Are the stars out tonight? I don't know if they're cloudy or bright, 'cause I only have eyes for you, dear. And that's about all I would sing, because I didn't want her to go deaf. And but I recited the rest of it. I mean, it was magical. And after those 7 days, probably then the worst day of my existence up to that point, happened as 3 beautiful, intelligent Danish women put their thumbs out. She blew me a kiss. They got a ride immediately, and they were headed to South Africa. Now, 15 years later, I went to that town to look up relatives that I knew were there in that area. So I went with some friends and found the relatives and met cousins and things like that. But unfortunately, I couldn't find her. I never saw her again, but she's still in my heart. Thank you.
Oh, Ed. While we were listening to that story, Ed, we only had eyes for you.
Thank you.
Lovely. Lovely. You know, Ed, we know that Ed can tell some tall tales. So as I was listening, I was wondering, is he taking us down? But the
Totally
heart,
true. All of it.
yeah, that shone through. Beautiful. All right. Well, I have a story, and it's a love story. I guess your love story, Ed, didn't have a happily ever after ending, but it still was a sweet, happy in its way love story. This is a sad love story. It's a legend from Paraguay, and I have the luck that I get to go to a school once a month and tell stories to everyone from the littlest kindergartners to the 8th graders, depending on the day, different ones. And I was telling stories to middle schoolers this week. And I wanted to tell them some love stories for, because it's Valentine's Day just passed. And So I was looking for a new story to tell, and I looked in a place that I look a lot, and I recommend to others who like, traditional stories. And that's a book, one of the many books I have on my shelf from Margaret Reed MacDonald. And this one is 5-Minute Tales. Now, when she tells it, it's short. Mine isn't quite as short, but so I found this legend from the Guarani people in Paraguay. And it explains, it's a legend that explains the origin of a kind of lace that is a very special kind of lace that Guarani women still make. And I'd like to try to share my screen for a minute and just show you, if I can. Let's see if it works. Can everybody see that? Yeah, okay. So okay. Screen sharing has stopped. Great. All right. I was actually able to get a piece of it myself on eBay because I wanted to see what it was like for myself. And when you look at it, and if you think about how a lot of legends or pourquoi stories about how things came to be relate to nature, and you kind of ask yourself, when you looked at that video and you look at this, what might have inspired this lace? Maybe you have something in your mind, and now let me tell you the story and see. So this is the story of a beautiful young Guarani woman, young girl, who fell in love with a very handsome young man. He was the village chief's son, and they were very much in love, and their parents were in favor of the match. So the date was set for their wedding and the preparations began. And the young man decided that he wanted to bring something so special as a gift for his beloved. And he thought, what can I bring that will show how much I care about her and how deserving I am to marry her? And he decided, and this is a society of hunters who live right near the jungle, that he would go into the jungle and hunt a jaguar and bring her back a jaguar skin as his wedding gift. Now, he knew that jaguars are very dangerous. Their powers are physical and magical, but he thought that would make the gift so much the better. And he was not afraid. He was skilled. He was resourceful. And he set off, and he spent the whole day searching for jaguars in the jungle and hadn't found a single one or any sign of one. And so as night fell, he decided, I'm not giving up. And he saw a huge tree, and he thought, I'm going to make myself, from the vines hanging down from this tree, cut them with my knife and make myself a hammock. And he did that, and he hung the hammock in the tree, and he climbed into the hammock, and he went to sleep, thinking that would be a way to stay safe in the night. Well, he was a chief's son. He was handsome. He was skilled, but anyone can make a mistake and make a foolish choice, as we know. And this was a foolish choice. So foolish a choice that he never came back. The next day, he didn't come back. The next week, he didn't come back. The next month, he hadn't come back. And the young woman waited and waited and waited, and he never came back. She never married anyone else. He was the love of her life. And it was many years later that some hunters from their tribe happened to come across that huge tree in the forest. And when they looked down at the ground under the tree, they saw a bow and a quiver of arrows, and they recognized that they were the chief's sons from their designs. And when they looked up into the branches of the tree, they saw two skeletons hanging in the tree. One was the skeleton of a jaguar, and the other was the skeleton of the chief's son. But that skeleton was not bare. It was wrapped in the most beautiful, finely woven, well, it was like a shroud. It was like a funeral shroud, but not made of any material that humans make. It was made, it was made of spiders' webs. Because all the spiders of the forest had seen what happened to the young man. Somehow, and who knows which happened first? Did he wound the jaguar and then not fatally enough that the jaguar killed him as well? Or maybe it was the other way around, but in any case, he had died, and his beloved, who would have made his funeral shroud, was not there to make it. And so the spiders worked together and they made this shroud. Well, these hunters cut down the body and carried it back to the village and went to the home of now the woman, a widow before she was even married. And they gave it to her, and so that she could bury her beloved. And she was glad to have it back, glad to have what we might call closure these days. But she didn't have closure because she couldn't stop thinking, it was I who should have made his shroud. And she felt that just gnawed at her. And so she decided to bravely set out with help to show her where that tree was, to go into the forest and to watch those spiders, to watch them do their work, to see how when they surrounded something with their shroud, with their webs, if the rains came down, as of course the rain came hard in a tropical place like that, they would immediately go and repair it. When the winds blew, like the winds have been blowing here, their work would be in tatters, but she watched so carefully day after day to see how they knit it back together. And she learned everything that they did. And so once she had learned that, she went back and she wove, or I think you call it wove. She made a lace shroud just like theirs. And she wrapped her beloved in it, and he was buried. And that's the end of her story, but it's not the end of the story of the Nyanduti lace. It's still, this tradition has been passed down over years and years and years, and Guarani women still make it. And Nyanduti, the name of this lace, it means the spider's web. That's the legend. All right.
Yeah.
Well, Sally?
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank
to
you
you.
Liz, for that lovely, lovely story of love. Isn't that sweet?
I had a quick question, Liz.
Yeah.
What was the name of the book that you just
Oh,
told
yes.
us about?
It's called, I'll put it in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, it's called 5-Minute Stories or 5-Minute Tales. And she also has a book called 3-Minute Tales.
Thank you.
Yes, and everybody make sure to look in the chat also for the information about the Bay Area Storytelling Festival. Sally.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to try telling to all of you. I'm going to continue the love stories. Hold on 1 minute. You know, some people say that the eyes are the mirror of the soul. And some people say if you want to know about someone, look in the palm of their hand. Now, my friend Cynthia Goodwin says that if you want to know somebody, you look in their mouth. Do they have good gums, which means they're healthy? Do they have gold and porcelain in their mouths, which means they must have some money? But of course, Cynthia is a dental hygienist. I have to change this. Hold on. So Cynthia is a dental hygienist, and she's also a matchmaker. Now, if you're a man and you sit in her chair and she puts you back and puts on a bib and all that, looks in your mouth, if she decides that you are a good potential mate, she will try to fix you up. And we were a group of about 6 ladies from the Sierra Club, and Cynthia went and fixed us off one by one. And one day she called me and said, Sally, a really nice guy came and sat in my chair, and I think you should go out with him. He's a contractor. And you know how good it is to have a contractor. You can ask him to do things. So I said, yes, I would go out with him. And a couple of days later, the bell rings and I open the door. And there stands this guy, nice looking face, beautiful, beautiful blue eyes. And he's wearing a knit shirt that shows off all those contractor muscles. And he's got jeans on and it has a press down the center, and he's wearing cowboy boots. And I think to myself, is this an urban cowboy? Well, I invite him in the house and we do our introductions, and he says, come on, let's go out for dinner. And I open the door and I look down to the driveway, and there sitting in the street is a pickup truck. Now, I don't want to sound snobby or anything, but I have never had a date come and pick me up in a pickup truck. And so I went around to the door and opened the door. How in the hell do you get in the thing? You know? So Bob, his name is Bob, he made like a stirrup with his feet, with his hands, and sort of threw me into the cab of the car, and off we went. And at dinner time, we were discussing, you know, this and that. And I couldn't help it. I looked at him and I said, are you an urban cowboy or are you really a cowboy? Well, he said, you know, my mother died when I was 9 years old. And my father sent myself and my 2 brothers to a camp where we all had horses. And we learned to ride and to rope and to, learn to ride bucking horses. And then I had horses for quite a while. And when I got married and had children of my own and had land, I had horses. He said, I'm sort of a real cowboy. And I thought about that and I said, you know what? I had the same, something similar happen to me. My parents sent me to boarding school when I was 10 years old in North Carolina. And from North Carolina to Chicago, boarding school was in Chicago. And my house mother decided that we should become ladies. And one of the things that a lady should know was how to ride a horse. And so we went to a stable in Chicago, Christensen Stable, and rode round and round this ring. And I had a horse whose name was Bella. And I would tell that horse everything, how terrible the house mother was, how horrible the food was, how I missed my parents. And I continued to ride. And I rode all through grammar school and high school. And when I was in college, every summer I was a riding counselor somewhere. And I continued to ride until I got married. Well, the years passed, and then this occasion came when I met Bob, and we sort of clicked, and our relationship sort of started to go forward, and it was like in stages. And the first stage I would call just one of the girls. Now I had girlfriends that I had made up here from the Sierra Club, and we hiked and we partied and we had potlucks and we had fun. And Bob just came and just fit right into that group, and we just called him one of the girls. Did you invite Bob? You know he's one of the girls. And he took us to wonderful places to camp. And his idea of having a good time was to climb the highest mountain or hill that was there. And we would struggle up this hill. And we get to the top of the hill and Bob would say, and I named this hill for Shelley. And from then on, it was called Shelley's Mountain, and that's how we managed. And one day, Bob drove over to my house and I looked into the cab of the truck, and he had an old canoe, a really old canoe, wooden, heavy canoe, not any of this fiberglass wonderful thing, but a heavy wooden canoe. And he said, come on, let's go put this in the reservoir and see if she floats. So we went down to the reservoir and I got into the bow of the canoe and started to paddle. And Bob's yelling at me, paddle, Sally, paddle, Sally. And I said, I am paddling, I am paddling. And that's what we did for weekend after weekend with him yelling paddle, and on we went. And then we decided one weekend we would go to Benicia and put the canoe in there. And we did, and we canoed around and decided to go have some wine. So we tied the canoe up to the dock, went and had wine. And then when we came back, we looked at the dock, and the canoe wasn't there. Where was the canoe? Not there. So we went down and looked in the water, and the thing had sunk. Somehow or another, there had been a hole in the canoe, and it sunk to the bottom. I faked it, but I was really happy about that. And then weeks passed, and the truck came, and in that truck were bikes. Now, my kids taught me how to ride a bike, so I was not very proficient. But Bob said that we should start riding bikes. There's lots of bike trails and all that. So off we went on these bikes. And every time we rode on these bikes, the wind was always coming towards me, always. And he was always yelling, pedal, Sally, I am pedaling. And one day, we brought the bikes home and chained them up in the carport as we always had, and went in the house, and the day passed, went to bed, got up the next morning, went out the carport, and somebody had stolen the bikes. So for a while, we just hiked around, and coincidentally, my daughter bought a house. We had a barn and 2 horses, and she said to me one day, Mother, why don't you go out there and you and Bob ride these horses for me? I don't have time. Well, they were kind of nags, but of course we hadn't ridden horses for 35 years or something like that. Well, we got on these horses, mounted these horses, and started off into Wildcat Canyon, and it was magical. You had this wonderful view. They went along. You didn't have to pedal. You didn't have to do any of that stuff. It was great. And maybe 2 weeks later, Bob said, let's get horses. We have a truck, we have a camper, we'll get a horse trailer. Let's get horses. We'll ride all over California. So we did. But they weren't just any kind of horse. They were called Peruvian Pasos. Now, a Peruvian Paso is a wonderful horse. It's a gaited horse. It goes pucka, 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 and it is so smooth that you can hold a glass of champagne and it won't spill. It's a wonderful horse. And we took those horses and rode as we had planned through California. We went to the mountains, we went to the Sierras, we went down to the desert, and I got to live that fantasy. You know, when you see that TV ad of the woman riding the horse in the ocean with her hair whiffing behind her, and I don't know what they're selling. I got to do that. Here I was on my little horse going pucka, 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 pucka in the ocean. And I felt like a TV ad. We had wonderful adventures with those horses for many, many years. And then when I was 70, I fell off the damn horse and got hurt and couldn't ride for a while. And then when I went back, I couldn't do it. I was just too afraid. And I said to Bob, I can't ride horses anymore. And he said, well, that's all right, but I'm going to continue. So he continued to ride for several more years. And it kind of slowed us down, and I noticed that he was slowing down. And then one day he went to renew his driver's license and couldn't pass the written test. So the we went to Kaiser and he had a test. And the doctor said, you know, you have signs of dementia. And Kaiser informed the card, you know, the motor vehicles. And they tested Bob and took away his license. And we decided, well, we'll just live with this. And we did. We continued on with our lives. But Bob began to slow down, and then he needed more help, more help. And I decided that he should go to a senior living place, but he only lasted for a few days, for a few weeks, because he hated being there. And so I brought him home and I said, all right, we're going to go through this journey just like we went through the canoes and we went through the bicycles, and we can go through this. And we did. And finally, we had to bring in the hospital bed. And then the day came and he was in his hospital bed looking out the den window. And he said, you know, I'm leaving you. I'm going on a journey. And here comes my horse. Pucka, 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 pucka. And so he left. And here I am. And it is time that I say to you, good night. So thank you so very much for coming. Wonderful, wonderful stories. Thank you, all the tellers. You were just terrific. We love you. Thank you for participating. Thank you for keeping this going. Come back next month. Enjoy. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Marnie, for being our tech host. Marnie will end the recording. Sally, that was so beautiful.